Welcome back to another exciting episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, of course, Phil Bennett, the podcast mogul. And today we're going to be exploring the transformational power of business with an industry titan whose vision is changing the entrepreneurial world. Our guest today is a true powerhouse in the management consulting world. With over 3 decades of leadership experience under his belt, he is a business strategist and seasoned entrepreneur who knows how to cultivate meaningful relationships, structure organizations for lasting success, and guide entrepreneurs through the complexities of strategic planning and operations. But of course, he doesn't stop there. He's also the founder of the Pursuit of Value podcast. He's making waves by distilling intricate business concepts into practical, actionable insights. His mission: to empower 1 million small businesses each month to avoid stress and failure, achieve sustainable growth, and of course, create meaningful impact in their communities. Driven by a belief in the transformational potential of strong businesses and the responsibility of leaders to shape the world for the better, this visionary is here to deliver an unmatched wisdom that you will want to implement in your own journey. So get ready to take a lot of notes because I got my pad and paper ready right here, and we're going to be inspired by the one, the only Marcus Hamaker. Marcus, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Hey, I appreciate the intro. That was very kind. It's a pleasure.
You are very welcome. When I got your request to be on the podcast, I was like, I have 84,000 questions. But of course, I always like to start with the very simplest one, the one that means the most to my audience. Why did you decide to become an entrepreneur? Why did you throw off the shackles of 9 to 5 and venture forth into this crazy world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, my dad, first and foremost, my dad started his business 1976, and the reason he started it was because he was a young father. He saw early on that if he were to stay in his job, he would hit the ceiling relatively quick. My dad, very motivated man, very good man. He's a beautiful man, and he just did it. And so he took a year. He learned how to pour concrete, believe it or not, with a relative, and thought, you know what, I can do this. I don't mind physical labor. I can make this work. And so I think roughly a year and a half later, he started his own business in 1976. And so it's always been there. I had a front row seat. I remember 6 years old, dad grabbing me out of bed in the summertime saying, guess what, you're going to work with me. And I just remember sleeping a lot, but I was always there, front row seat. And then as I got older, I never, dad, thankfully, even though I complained the whole time, he never gave me the option to not work. It was never on the table. It was, guess what? You can stand and watch me all day. I don't care, but you're coming. And it just instilled this work ethic that I'm so thankful for, even though I bitched about it most of my teenage years. I mean, every day.
Hindsight is
Yeah.
2020 for anybody in this world. Learning the valuable lessons, though, that's when it's the suck that we all
Yeah.
we all despise the suck, but love the
Yep.
suck afterwards because it's like that's what made me who I am. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, did you ever have that conventional 9 to 5, or because being sucked into the world of entrepreneurship and business ownership by your father, you straight after like high school, or if you went to university or college, you went and started your own business? What was that like, or did you always have something on the side while you were doing that 9 to 5?
Yeah, so I worked with dad all the way through high school. When I became a senior in high school, I wanted a new car, and my dad's like, "Well, you got to work in the summer. You can't afford it. I'm not going to buy it for you." And I had this brilliant idea my senior year. Well, I'll go get another job. I'll still work with you in the summer, but I'm gonna go bag groceries at this grocery store. And I think dad just liked the idea that I was being, I was doing it. And so he let me do it. And I think I had that job literally for like 4 months. And I was like, man, no way, this blows. I'm not doing this. So went back to work for dad, went off to school, I came back after school, and dad had the brilliant idea, we're going to make you a vice president. I know you're only 23, but you're going to be the vice president of this company. And I'm like, sweet. And I had no idea what that meant, but I loved business. I had a brain. I could figure it out. I watched dad long enough. And so I just got in, and I dug into the operations, the AP, the AR, the financing side of it. Got a PhD in HR because it's a construction company and there's a lot of turnover in construction. So I had guys threaten my life. I had, you name it. I experienced it in the construction industry. So, to answer your question, I did work for other people, and I didn't like that. And so, yeah.
And so you were working with dad once you were 23, so school's done. 23-year-old, you're a vice president getting your PhD pretty much in
Mhm.
both life, the School of Hard Knock business degree, and obviously becoming a master of HR because of the construction world being very unique and pretty much
Sure.
the fire that forges swords. When did you go from VP at Dad's Construction to branching out onto your own, becoming, in
Yeah.
essence, your own entrepreneur?
Yeah. So, mom and dad promised me their business for years. And about 3 or 4 years into that, I had this realization that it was just never going to happen because my dad was never going to stop. Dad would not retire. In fact, hindsight, what we're talking about, dad retired, I think, 3 years ago at the age of 72. So, I mean, I would have
It,
been still
I,
waiting.
I
So,
was about
yeah.
to ask, like, is Dad still working, or like, has Dad passed away and that's why the business has moved
No,
on?
dad retired for, I think, 6 months and then came to me and said, "Hey, I can't do this." And I said, "Well, let's start a handyman business, Dad." And so, long story short, he's now doing handyman stuff and doing yard work and doing stuff on his own, not with me, which, hey.
You just handle
But
the business. You're like, I'll take care of the finances stuff. That I'll handle. You just do you.
I actually started it for him. I said, "You know what? Let's do it. You can be a sole proprietor. We'll get you some marketing material. I'll get you the work, and then you go play." So I learned rather quickly, and so that was 23. I was off and on with mom and dad because it was like I got to go do something else. I can't just be working for mom and dad the whole time. I got to stretch my wings and everything. So about the age of 30, I determined that I was done with mom and dad, and went off and decided that I was going to be a golf professional, a teaching professional. So I went into the golf industry for 3 years, learned that that wasn't what I thought it would be, and then and honestly, what it was is I had ordered all my books for the PGA school to go to the PGA school, and where you learn turf management, cart management, and how to deal with people that complain about the greens, and just really
Hotel
awesome stuff.
management for PGA.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And I got all my books and I'm looking at them, and it was like 2 years worth of schooling I had to go through. And I was making like $9 an hour standing behind a golf counter. And I'm like, is this really what I want for myself? And I just made a decision. I'm like, you know what, I'm not doing this. And I was living in a different town than my dad at that time. I had moved about 100 miles away. And I was like, you know what? I want to start a concrete company. I know it. I understand it. I don't have to compete with my father. I'm going to do this. And I just did it. I started it up with like, I think I had $2,500. I, created the entity, created my own marketing material. And honestly, I just went out to builders and I was pounding on doors. And I said, "Hey, look at me. I'm here. Can I quote work for you?" "No, not yet. Come back." "Okay, I'll come back." And within 4 months, I had work. It was beautiful. It was absolutely amazing. And then from that point on, it just took off. And yeah, anyways, it was good.
That is, well, what I like is you try different things. You were like, okay, I'm going to
Mhm.
try different things. I'm going to see if something's out there that bites. And if obviously if the PGA golf management system worked, you would have still be there. However, when you realized that it wasn't working for you, you went back to what you knew. You
Mhm.
you you pretty much your whole life was concrete. You knew how to run it. You knew how to talk to the builders. You knew there was no direct competition because
Mhm.
with your name, because your dad's 100 miles away. No one probably even heard of
Hmm.
mom and dad.
Right.
And I love how just the persistence of you knew what you do. You obviously saw that early stages when you were a kid, knew that it took time, but you already had a head start because you had worked in the industry for such a long time.
Right.
Um, when the business did you exit out that business, or is it still one of the businesses in your portfolio of businesses?
No, I exited out in 2010-ish. Um, but before we move on to that, I just want to say one thing because I think this is important for all entrepreneurs. I think back to when I started that business, and man, I don't know how I did it. I think that it was just stupidity and determination and all of that. Timing was beautiful, but the one thing that always drove me, and it still drives me today, is that I've always feared regret more than failure. I would rather take the risk and fail than not take the risk and then regret it. And I think that as entrepreneurs, that's pretty common, although some may trip up on the risk. I had to do it because if I didn't do it, I would have been incredibly unhappy. So very, really important.
I want to touch on the risk before we continue on with getting to
Mhm.
where we are today. I want to talk about the risk. How do you go about maybe mitigating that risk? Because obviously, failure is subjective. I look at failure as the first attempt in learning. If I fail something,
Mhm.
I'm just learning. It's my first attempt.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be perfect right off the bat. Um, how do you mitigate those bigger risks? Because some aspects of business is very risky. Some people may not have that $2,500 or $25,000 to put behind a
Mhm.
business.
Sure.
Um, or it's like their last little bit to go into that thing. How do you look at mitigating risk so that you can still get that success, even if it's not the success you first originally planned?
Yeah, well, a couple things there. I think you got to define what risk is to you as a person. I think that that's incredibly important. For me, it was if I fail, at least I tried. Like again, the risk of not trying was much greater than a risk of failure. Now, when you talk about different avenues of business, if you're talking about people's lives or financial risk, there's varying degrees of that. I think the higher the risk and the larger the risk, and that's up to interpretation to the individual. Um, because $1 million to me might be a lot different than $1 million to somebody else, right? I think you've got to plan appropriately. And so the risk level can come down the more that you plan and the more outside input that you get. It's super important to have really smart people around you. I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that can bring people together and glean and learn from other people. Um, and I think back to when I started my business, I really did a lot of things on my own. And I think I could have alleviated or not had a lot of mistakes had I pursued wisdom, and this is what I tell people here at the company that I currently run is, man, find somebody that's got some gray hair and sit down with that person and figure out why he's got gray hair, why she's got gray hair. And especially if it's somebody that's in your industry or that's in your sphere of influence. I think that that's really important. But again, to summarize, man, I view risk differently. I think it's just a part of life, and especially in business, it's just, man, let's try it. We won't know until we try because I've been around entrepreneurs that just plan and plan and plan and plan, and next thing you know, they're paralyzed, and time goes by, and the opportunity is gone because all they did was plan. And there's a line there. There really is. I think that there's a point in your walk that you have to just take the plunge, even if it seems risky. I mean, if you're determined, you got to go for it.
I like that. That's great. If you can see the end goal, just go for it, and eventually you'll reach it. So yeah, after the concrete, you sold it in 2010, I believe you mentioned, correct?
Mhm. Mhm.
What was after that? What was the next stage? Where were you in your life? What were you looking to do? Were you looking to
Yeah.
be go back to the PGA golfing course management?
Mhm.
What
No.
was going on for Marcus at this point?
Yeah, so I didn't sell it. I closed it because of the 2007, 8,
Mm,
9. The area that I was in was hit really, really hard. We had a very high inventory of houses. I pivoted to commercial. That slowly went away, so I ended up just closing it. What I did after that is I actually got into a bunch of different stuff, man. I don't even know where to start. I did about 3 years in boarding schools. I was a executive director, director of operations for boarding schools, and that was just through a guy that I knew. I was looking for something to do. I'm like, you know what? Let's try it. And so I did that. Learned a ton there. I mean, oh my gosh, that was such an education. And then after that, I got into the data center industry and really loved that a lot too. And this was working for other people. I did not start anything on my own at this point. About 2017, I started up my own consulting business and started consulting for the data center industry, for the construction industry. And yeah, and then today I'm CEO of a consulting firm, project management consulting firm, and I still have my consulting business on the side. And then I've got another business that I'm in the process of starting. So kind of doing a little bit of everything.
just a man with his hands in a lot of pies. Um, when did the podcasting come about? Because I'm always interested when an entrepreneur decides
Yeah.
to have a podcast because it's always usually very value focused. When did
Yeah.
you decide, hey, this is a good avenue for me, either for business or for personal?
Yeah.
Personal.
Well, it was like 2020. I had been consulting for small companies, for about 3 years, and there was always the same issue. It's when you look at companies, whether it be a small company with less than 10 employees or a large company with 1,000 employees, there's a correlation between some of the issues that they have. And so as I was consulting with a lot of the smaller companies, I'm like, man, there's always this same consistent issue. And I thought, you know what? I love helping small business because I've always had a heart for it. I think it's incredible. And I thought, you know what? I should start a podcast. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I don't want to start a podcast. I don't want to do that. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I really think I want to do this. And so I had developed this outline that I approach my consulting customers with. It was a very specific outline on what to look at inside your business. And I thought, you know what, I've got this outline. I can just start talking about some of these key points that I see. And so, over a period of, 2020, 21, 22, 23 to just this last year, we kind of just, again, took the plunge to do it. Did I have the time? Not necessarily. Did I have the heart for it? Yes. I was at that point after ruminating on it for a few years. It's like, you know what, I want to do this. And it actually corresponded quite well with the current role that I'm in as CEO for a consulting company. Um, so it's, we've only done one season and we've done some really cool talk. Season one was all about the business owner mindset, which I really enjoyed. Season number two is going to be about culture, company culture. And so it just kind of builds on each other. So if I could jump back in time and really think about, okay, how do I want to start this business? I would have changed my mindset in the beginning, right? As an entrepreneur, I would have said, okay, you need to focus on these things. And then culture, really understanding how important that is, to the employee experience, to the customer experience. Culture is so important. It's to me, it's the most important thing. So,
I love it. With your podcast, obviously you're trying to position yourself as obviously the go-to person, the authority in this consulting world, um, and creating businesses that are there to be successful. Obviously,
mhm,
using
right.
your methods to be the successful businesses that everybody wants. When developing, because as someone who's launched multiple podcasts for my clients, most of them say they want their podcast to be for everyone. And as someone who's been podcasting for a while, I want your opinion. Do you have a specific person that you design your podcast episode for, or are you one of those people who just say it's a podcast for everybody?
No, when I went into this and I kind of did this discovery session with myself, it's like who do I want to help? Number one, it's business owners. It's people that have started their business, or whether it be they're 2 weeks in or 20 years in. Again, very similar things that happen. And when you look at the very first episode of my podcast, I just throw out a bunch of statistics, and 30% of all businesses fail within 2 years, 50% fail within 5 years. It's what is it, 90%? No, I'm sorry, 70% fail by the 10-year mark. So 7 out of 10 businesses will fail by the 10-year mark. To me, that's incredible. And then you look at there's 35 million small businesses in the US. There's over 400 million around the world. And so that failure rate is pretty dramatic. And so when I think about who I want to help that stat go away. I want business owners because I know what it was like to start a business. I watched my dad do it. I watched, men that I've consulted with do it. It's hard. It's hard on your family. It's hard on you. And if you can have some mental tools, business owner mindset, understanding culture, and then, later on we get into more nuts and bolts, but just having the right perspective on how to run a really good business, you can change the world. You really can. Because again, 99.9% of all businesses are a small business. Now, you can break that down even more because of how they classify small businesses, but it's still a 98, 97, 98% of all small businesses, or all businesses are small business. And, I can walk out of my office here and point to half a dozen, right? And so it's a real thing, and it can have tremendous impact on the world for good. And that's kind of my mission.
I love it. Oh, it's a mission after my own heart. Um, what do you do to invest in yourself? Because you seem to be somewhat of a renaissance man, if you will. You have your construction pass, so you have that very mm, we'll say very physical labor type job, and then you go into the data science boarding school. You have this very varied background. Plus now you do consulting, which you're allowed to you get to touch on so many different
Yeah.
aspects of businesses and different industries. What do you do to stay continually become a better version of yourself, so that you can reach the perfection that we all dream of being?
Yeah. um, Honestly, I try really, really hard to be as teachable as I can. I think having the attitude that you're always willing to learn something. I've always liked learning. I try to do it every day. I get here early and I want to read something. I want to deposit something of value in myself because when I think of when I thought of the podcast, it was the pursuit of value. Like, what does that mean? Well, I, as a business leader, as a business owner, every day I need to pursue value. I need to pursue value in my employees and my customers and myself and the processes and the systems of my business. I want to pursue it. So that's me taking action. It's an action thing. So I always want to learn something. I always want to be teachable. I want to always try to increase my emotional intelligence. I want to understand data. What does it mean? Because there's data all around us, right? How do I apply that to my everyday life? And then with my employees, same thing. I'm always coaching and teaching to be teachable, and then to ask for help, because that's a hard thing to do, especially in the younger generation. Um, that it's not wrong and you're not weak to ask for help. If you're drowning, ask for help. If you don't know, ask for help, because that in and of itself is a type of humility that opens the door to knowledge and wisdom. And if you think you know it all, and if you don't remain teachable, man, I'm sorry, but I think you're going to have a rough go at it.
Oof, dropping some heavy quotes there that I'm gonna love to clip for the audience to hear and promote, because that is true. Like you said, if you're not teachable and if you're not open to learn, um, you're bound to fail. or
Yeah.
have a harder time. And it harkens back to what you said earlier about being the smartest person in the room. It's not what we want to be. We want to be the dumbest person in a room full of geniuses, if you will.
Yeah.
Because that's when you start learning, and being teachable is 10xing your life.
Yeah.
Because there's wisdom, like you said, wisdom all around us with data and that. And having people who can help you understand that data is key. Um,
Absolutely.
with where you are right now, um, and where you're looking to go, I'm interested in the future for you. In 10 years, where do you see yourself? Are you still the CEO of this consulting firm? Do you still have your consulting practice on the side? Or are you in a completely different industry, blowing it up, and, who knows what you're doing?
Man, that's a great question. And I was asking myself that over the weekend. Um, I really love what I do. I like running an organization because I get to deposit, into people. I get to coach, I get to teach, I get to learn. But honestly, I would like for the podcast to do well because I like the ability to the just the broadness of it and the ability to touch other lives. I really do like that. Um, I want to continue to own businesses. I'm very I love private equity companies in the fact of how they can own multiple businesses and then build them up and then help owners. Uh, they can buy owners out. They can help owners grow their company. I wouldn't mind being involved in some sort of private equity company that did good. There's some private equity companies that just poach poach and steal. But
One
um,
that's changing the world for the better. We're looking
right,
for.
exactly.
I love that, and I think I can see you doing that with what you're doing right now. The positivity that you're putting out, I definitely can see you moving into a role where you're bringing even more by doing the private equity aspect. Whether you start your own because you're like, I don't want to work for someone else, or you join another equity firm, they're going to be
Yeah.
benefiting greatly from you. Um, as a podcaster, I know I'm coming back to the podcast, less business. Um,
Mhm.
is there a podcast that you listen to, or is in your routine, your playlist of podcasts that you recommend for business entrepreneurs? And obviously, the pursuit of value is, of course, one that should be in everyone's playlist. Because it's a great podcast, but I would love to know: is there another podcast that you have on your playlist?
Yeah. So there's a book. I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Miller. He wrote Story Brand, really good book about marketing. And then he wrote a book called Business Made Simple. And the premise behind the book is, and he might say differently, but how I read it is, you don't have to go to college and get a business education. You could just read this book and glean from it. And it's really true. The principles that he put in this book are, from my perspective, one of the best I've ever seen. He's got a podcast, Business Made Simple, I listen to fairly consistently. The other one that I really love, and it's more dramatic, it's called Business Wars by Wondery. Um, and they've got a couple series. They got Business Movers and then Business Wars. And it really, what it does is it takes like Pepsi versus Coke, and it just kind of breaks down that whole history. And that's Business Wars. And then Business Movers, they'll dive into Apple. It started with Steve Jobs and then it takes it through. And I think the last one I listened to was about Phil Knight and Nike. And I love that because you can learn from an entrepreneur standpoint, you can see the hardships that like Phil Knight went through or Steve Jobs went through to create these amazing companies. And I say amazing from the outside. I'm not on the inside, but
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Putting them on the pedestal that as entrepreneurs usually do for the big businesses
yes,
and the
right,
people
right,
who
right.
reach those goals.
Yeah. So I like that stuff. I mean, it's super entertaining. There was my son's, I've got a 9-year-old. I've got adult children too, but I've got a 9-year-old, and we were listening to the one about Lego, and he was all into it, and it was pretty cool just to hear the history and the hardship because, man, I don't care who you are. If you are an entrepreneur and you start a business, you will have hardship. That's
Mm.
just, it's not if, but when.
It's just part of the struggle of being an entrepreneur. It's the scars that we have to show,
Mhm.
right? We start with our gleaming
Absolutely.
armor, and by the time we become successful, it ain't so gleaming anymore. There's a lot of dents and
Yeah.
scuffs on it. Um, Now that you mentioned you have a 9-year-old son, which
Mhm.
makes this question even more kind of a
Yeah.
personal one as we close out the show here. um, I would love to know, Marcus, what advice would you love to be able to give to your son, your 9-year-old son, when they turn 10?
Yeah.
What is that one piece you wish you had as a 10-year-old that you could pass off to your 10-year-old child?
Yeah. So there's two. For me, number one is learn to take a punch. And what I mean by that is what we just touched on, that you're going to get knocked down, man, and you got to learn to get up. And and this is a life lesson, but really as an entrepreneur, anybody that starts a business, man, I could tell you stories just being in business of some of the things that I've had to deal with and face, and um, hard, humiliating, embarrassing, um, exhausting, all the above, right? So that's number one, learn to take a punch. And number two, after you take that punch, learn from it. So be teachable. Those are the two things that with my son, I tell him quite a bit. It's like, man, and this might sound horrible, but I tell my son quite often, you don't know everything. I mean, let's just be clear. I know
You
more than you, and I don't know anything. I don't know everything. So stop pretending that you know everything. Don't be that guy. And you know, it's just super important to have that understanding, that because again, if you understand that you don't know everything, then you can understand how to make a mistake better. It just makes sense that way.
Ooh, that is a good line. When you understand that you don't know everything, you learn how to take a mistake better. Oh,
Yeah.
another golden nugget there, another golden gem. Um, Marcus, I'm going to jump off stage while I dissect that and just let that sink into me, because it still hit me really hard. Please let my audience know where they can connect with you, follow you, learn about the podcast, anything you care to share with them. The floor, sir, is yours.
Yeah, thank you. It's the povpodcast.com. There you can find links to Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We also have resources that you can download. Every episode has a summary. Want to make sure that everybody's able to take that and learn from it and apply it to their business. So, yeah, it's the povpodcast.com.
Amazing. Very simple, clear cut. I love it. You can tell he's a podcaster, sending you to one location like a
That's
genius.
right.
He's learned, people. He's learned because he's teachable. Marcus, I want to thank you so much for an amazing episode. I had a great time chatting with you, and I'm definitely looking forward to jumping down and devouring all those episodes of your podcast, as well as some of those ones that you suggested by Donald Miller. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for that.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below so you can connect with Marcus at his podcast, his social media, anywhere you want to learn from him. They're down in the show notes down below. And I want to thank you again for listening. And remember to always invest in yourself.